The Sense of an Ending. Let's talk about it. I really appreciated this book. It's probably my favorite out of all three books that we discussed throughout the semester. Um, and I want to explain why, because I think it deserves to kind of go into detail. And it's something that I think was evidently lacking in the other two novels. I think a great place to start when talking about the book itself is to acknowledge kind of the general theme that we're presented with here, right? Clearly, it still follows the theme of the class of unreliable narrators, which is evidently true in this book, just as it was in the last two. But it feels so much more relatable, and that's probably due to the particular period that's set in, right? I mean, it feels so much more lifelike, and it feels so much more sympathetic because of just how um, fairly present in time the book is set in, which is something a little bit different than what we have been used to throughout the other two novels. Throughout this novel, I think um, what I really appreciated about the novel, and perhaps what really did it for me, in it being my favorite out of the three, um, was just how relatable this cast of characters was. Like, I mean, Tom to me is like such a homily of myself sometimes, and um, this kind of eerily familiar personality that I can relate to in some deprecating ways. It's clear to me that Tom and everyone else really in this book are all imperfect, and that's kind of the beauty that I appreciate about this class in particular, right? I mean, that if you go through the Good Soldier in particular, right, there's so many instances of everyone in that particular book being flawed, right? Of there being some sort of imperfection at the very least, right? Um, we sense it throughout much of this book as well, and it was something that um, I thought was kind of uh, not just similar, but also just kind of a breath of fresh air in how it's presented, right? Um, and again, I also feel like this goes back to it just being more of a modern, more contemporary adaptation as such. But it's clear to me that Tom's biggest flaw here is um, being so carefree and being so self-centered and egotistical and naive and just a bit of an asshole, if we're being honest here, right? Um, I think we have a tendency as people, when we are um, either around people that we are comfortable with, or in instances of where we aren't sure who we are as people, uh, how we have this tendency, perhaps knowingly or unknowingly, to just talk, right? And to make it so self-centered and to make it about ourselves. And I wonder if that's maybe because we're so afraid of it not being about ourselves because we're so lost. You know what I mean? I wonder if there is this uh, impulse and reflex for us as human beings, as people who live and value and cherish community and being understood and being seen and having an identity in a way, right? I wonder if we value that so much, and we make it so inextricably linked to who we are and how we're going to present ourselves to other people and how we are going to be remembered by, whether that be in this book or in real life, to one another and the people that we know in our lives, right? I wonder if all of that isn't just some sort of coincidence. I wonder if that is perhaps related to one another. Um, I would like to say that it is, personally. Just in my experience, in the stories that I've read, in the experiences I've gone through in my limited time here on Earth, and also just through the lives of other people who've told me their stories as well, and have had very eerily familiar stories to Tom's as well. And that kind of seems to be the theme to me throughout much of the book, and was something that I really came to have a lot of, maybe not pity, but certainly a lot of relatability to. Um, I think that the other thing as well that I really appreciated was there wasn't only this um, exposure to such a flaw, but there was also this willingness to um, accept that flaw for what it is, right? To recognize that throughout pretty much all of Tom's entire life, up until the book, was a time in which he was so confident of himself, was so sure that he did the right things, and that he lived a life that, uh, sure, maybe could have been more memorable in his mind, right? I mean, he makes a point of that throughout much of the book, uh, but was still a life nonetheless that didn't have any sort of severe consequences in his mind, any sort of instances of actions or words that might have been spoken or done that could have caused tremendous harm. When in reality, it's throughout this book that he realizes that it's actually the opposite. That he has in fact done that he has in fact hurt people, and all these questions that he's been wrestling with his whole life, right? Of Adrian's suicide, for example, right? All of that in his mind, seemingly all throughout this very condensed amount of time, given just how thin the book is seemingly all crashing down on him all at once, which is perhaps probably the most beautiful metaphor for this kind of surreal slap in the face that reality has a cruel way of exhibiting to all of us, which was something that felt, again, incredibly familiar to myself, at least, and maybe that's relatable to you as well. Um, but throughout that particular period in the book, uh, of Tom realizing what he's done, right? Of sort of being reminded of the very things that he's tried maybe pretty hard to forget, right? And to move away from and be completely disassociated with, right? Are now seemingly coming back to haunt him, right? And to kind of uh, make its presence known in his life, that aren't just uncomfortable or perhaps not very roomy or hospital, but are meant to be intentionally grounding, right? Are meant to humble him, right? Are meant to ask him these tough questions of who he really is, right? And for us as an audience, serves as just straight up evidence, right, of just how unreliable he really is. Um, Not only did I enjoy the book, but I also enjoyed the film adaptation as well. And I don't just say that as a Downton Abbey enthusiast like myself, who saw Tom's daughter make some cameos throughout the book as well. Um, but I also say it because I feel like the director really understood uh, the point of the book, right? Uh, these very instances and themes that I, albeit not so well, am trying to touch on myself. Um, there's an eerily um, reminiscent theme throughout much of both the book and the film adaptation, that I feel like kind of hammers home what I'm trying to say here, right? Uh, and it's also a theme that we've seen throughout the last previous books as well, right? In both Lolita and The Good Soldier. Um, and that is mortality in my mind, right? Uh, it's sort of this waking of the conscience for our main characters, right? For the conflicts and the arguments that arise throughout each novel, and just how profoundly they ask each main character not only who they are as people, where their morals lie, but also ask these same narrators and main characters, and even us as an audience as well, as we wrestle with these texts as well, of just how limited our time as people really is, right? Of just how important then it previously might have been in our minds before this class, of just how uh, imperative it is that we set out and we do what we want to do, right? That we live a life uh, that has very little regrets, but also understanding that we're going to have some at the end of the day, right? There are going to be actions that we do, words that we say that are going to have consequence, that are going to hold weight to them, that are going to form and dissolve relationships with other people, and that are inevitably going to create tensions and conflicts with other people. And understanding the complexity and the nuances of each conflict is, in my mind, probably the most humanistic train of thought one could possibly seek to venture out and understand, and is something that I feel like each of these authors do a phenomenal job of highlighting, albeit within a fairly condensed amount of time, right? Um, and it's something that I am certainly going to take away with me, even after all three of these books, as I continue to wrestle in my 20s, what actions I want to take, what I want to do with my life, and kind of wrestle with my own mortality and my own morals, right? And try and juggle and balance my own relationships with other people who I care about and that I'm in community with. So it really is a fascinating book, and is again probably why it's my favorite out of